That's right, listeners. We know you're all here to really get a grasp on important topics.
That's our goal. And today is all about something truly fundamental: how our food is produced.
Seriously, this is the stuff we all need to know.
We've got a really interesting collection of materials lined up for you today. Some history, really practical stuff about how modern farming actually works.
Yeah.
And our goal for this deep dive, simple. We want to unpack all the essentials about growing and managing crops.
It's like giving you the inside scoop on how we, as a society, get food on the table.
Exactly. We want you to walk away feeling like you really understand this crucial part of our world. So, ready to rewind the clock a bit?
Let's go.
Way, way back, like 10,000 BCE, back to the very beginnings of agriculture. Can you imagine these nomadic communities constantly on the move to find food?
Yeah.
And then the light bulb goes off, hey, what if we could actually stay put, cultivate the land, and grow our own food?
Talk about a game changer.
A total game changer. That's when we start to see the emergence of crops like rice and wheat. This was a monumental shift, going from hunting and gathering to actually planting and harvesting. And just a quick reminder, when we say crop, we're talking about large-scale planting, like an entire field dedicated to wheat.
Right.
A wheat crop, not just a few plants here and there.
It's the scale that matters.
Yeah.
That switch, going from living as nomads to settling down to farm, that was like a pivot point in history, honestly. And when we look at the huge variety of food we eat today, it all traces back to those early cultivated plants. We're talking about cereals, vegetables, fruits. That's basically the foundation of our diet.
Right, and let's not forget how much climate influences what can be grown where. In India, with its diverse conditions, the seasons basically dictate the whole agricultural calendar.
Absolutely.
Our sources highlight two major cropping patterns in India: the Kharif crops and the Rabi crops. First up are the Kharif crops. These are grown during the rainy season, June to September.
Perfect timing for plants that need a lot of water.
You got it. Paddy, for example, needs tons of water, so it's almost exclusively grown during Kharif. You've also got things like maize, soybean, groundnut, cotton, all thriving in those rainy months.
And then you've got the Rabi crops coming into their own during the winter months, October to March. This is when you see staples like wheat, gram, pea, mustard, linseed being cultivated. And it's also worth mentioning that in many areas, farmers squeeze in an extra growing season during the summer, cultivating pulses and vegetables. So they really make the most of those favorable conditions.
They do. Which brings us to a really big question. With all of us relying on these crops, how do we actually produce food on such a massive scale?
Right. How do we feed everyone?
Our sources break it down into 7 fundamental steps, the essential practices of agriculture.
Like the blueprint for getting food from the farm to our plates.
Exactly. These are the steps that every farmer, in some form or another, follows. First, you've got to prepare the soil. Then you've got to sow the seeds. After that, it's all about adding manure and fertilizers to nourish those plants.
Keeping those nutrients flowing.
Right. Then comes irrigation, getting that vital water to the crops. And of course, you've got to protect those growing plants from weeds.
Those pesky invaders.
Exactly. Then it's time for the big event, harvesting the mature crops. And finally, you need a plan for storage to make sure all that hard work doesn't go to waste.
It's really quite a journey when you break it all down like that.
It is. So let's start at the very beginning with preparing the soil. Now, it might seem like a simple step, but it's way more important than you might think. Why is tilling or plowing, that turning and loosening of the soil, so crucial for the whole process?
Well, it's like setting the stage. Think about it. This simple act of loosening the soil has some big implications. First, it allows those roots to penetrate deeper into the ground.
Makes sense. A deeper root system.
Right. Deeper roots mean a stronger anchor for the plant and access to those deeper water reserves in the soil. And here's another thing. Loosening the soil dramatically improves aeration. Basically, the roots can breathe easier, which is crucial for their growth and health.
It's like giving those roots some breathing room.
Haha, exactly.
Yeah.
And our sources point out that it's not just about the roots themselves. This process also benefits all those little helpers in the soil, the earthworms and microbes.
Those little guys are often called the friends of the farmer. And for good reason.
They're like nature's soil engineers. They help to turn and loosen the soil even further. More importantly, they play a big role in making the soil fertile by adding humus, which is like nature's own fertilizer. It's that rich, decomposed organic matter. And here's another fascinating thing. When dead plants and animals decompose in the soil, they release all sorts of essential minerals and nutrients. Turning the soil brings these nutrient-rich layers closer to the surface, right where the plant roots can easily access them.
So it's like giving the plants a nutrient buffet.
Aha, I like that. A nutrient buffet delivered right to their roots.
Now, when it comes to the actual process of plowing, historically, wooden plows were used, but more and more we see iron ones taking over. These plows can be drawn by animals like bulls, or in some regions, horses, or even camels. And there are a couple of key parts to a plow. You've got the plowshare, that's the sharp iron blade that cuts through the soil, and the plow shaft, which is the long handle or beam that the farmer or the animal uses to guide the plow.
It's amazing to think about how these tools have evolved. Wooden plows are still around in some places, but the durability and efficiency of iron plows have really made them the go-to for most farmers. And our sources mention that if the soil's really dry, it might need some watering before plowing just to soften it up a bit.
Makes sense. It's easier to work with moist soil.
Exactly. And after plowing, you often end up with these clumps of soil, sometimes they call them crumbs, that need to be broken down to create a smoother surface.
That's where the leveling comes in, right?
Yep.
Using a leveler to smooth things out.
Right. A leveler breaks down those clumps, creates a nice, even surface for planting. This is important not just for sowing the seeds evenly, but also for irrigation. You want that water to flow smoothly across the field.
Like a well-prepped canvas for planting.
Exactly. And sometimes farmers will add manure to the field before tilling.
So it gets mixed in really well with the turning of the soil.
That's the idea. And then right before sowing, they'll often moisten the soil again just to create those ideal conditions for the seeds to germinate.
So it's all about getting that soil just right. Now, besides the plow, what are some of the other tools farmers use to prep the soil before sowing?
Yeah, there's the hoe. It's a pretty basic tool, but super important. Basically, it's got a long handle, usually made of wood or iron, and a strong bent blade at the end. Farmers use it for removing weeds and for loosening the soil, especially in smaller areas.
And this one is often pulled by animals, right?
Yep, still very much in use today. But then you've got the cultivator, which is more of a modern solution.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Cultivator sounds like a more efficient option.
Definitely. Cultivators are usually tractor-driven, and they can do the work of plowing and breaking up the soil much faster and with a lot less manual labor.
Technology to the rescue.
Exactly. This shift to more mechanized tools has been a big deal for agriculture.
Saving time and energy.
You got it.
Okay, so the soil is prepped, nice and smooth. What's next? It's time to sow the seeds.
Time to plant. But it's not just about scattering seeds around. The quality of the seeds matters a lot. Farmers have to choose good quality, clean, healthy seeds from varieties known for producing a good yield.
So you need the right kind of seed for the job.
For sure. And there's actually a simple test you can do to see if seeds are healthy.
Oh, really? How do you do that?
Well, if you take a bunch of seeds and put them in water, the damaged hollow seeds, the ones that are unlikely to germinate, will float to the top.
Okay.
The good ones, the healthy seeds, will sink to the bottom.
That's a pretty neat trick.
It is. It's all about density.
So once you've got your good seeds, how do you actually plant them?
Well, our sources describe both traditional and modern methods. Traditionally, farmers used a tool that looked like a funnel. They would put the seeds in the top of the funnel, and then the seeds would travel down through 2 or 3 pipes with sharp ends that pierced the soil and deposited the seeds at a specific depth.
So that's how they made sure the seeds were planted at the right depth. Pretty clever.
Right.
And what about the modern method?
These days, it's all about the seed drill. It's typically attached to a tractor. What's so great about the seed drill is how precise it is. It sows those seeds, uniformly maintaining the same distance between them, and plants them at a consistent depth.
So no more guesswork.
Right. That consistent spacing is really important because it prevents the plants from getting overcrowded and competing with each other for resources.
So everyone gets enough sunlight, nutrients, and water.
You got it. And there are some other benefits of the seed drill, too. It makes sure that the seeds are actually covered by soil after planting, protecting them from hungry birds. Plus, like the cultivator we talked about, the seed drill is a huge time saver compared to those manual methods.
I can see why that would be a game changer for farmers.
Absolutely. And it's worth noting that for some plants, like paddy and some forest and flowering plants, farmers actually start them off in a nursery before transplanting them to the main field.
Why do they do that?
Well, growing them in a nursery gives those young seedlings a more controlled, protected environment to get started. Once they're strong enough, they get carefully transplanted to the main field with the right spacing to help them thrive.
That makes sense. And it all circles back to that idea of giving each plant enough space to grow. You can't just plant a ton of seeds in a tiny area and expect them all to flourish, can you?
Nope. Proper spacing is super important. If plants are too close together, they'll be battling it out for sunlight, water, and nutrients.
Kind of like siblings fighting over the last cookie.
Exactly. And just like with those siblings, that competition can lead to some not getting enough. In this case, that means the plants can end up stunted and you get a lower overall yield.
So even after those seeds sprout, farmers sometimes need to thin them out to make sure the remaining plants have enough room to grow.
That's right. It's like making sure everyone gets a fair share.
Okay, so the soil is prepped, the seeds are sown with the right spacing. What's the next critical thing plants need to grow?
Nutrients. That's where adding manure and fertilizers comes into play.
What exactly are manure and fertilizers?
Well, they are essentially substances that we add to the soil to provide those essential mineral nutrients that plants need to grow healthy and strong. Think of them as plant vitamins.
So why do we need to add them? Doesn't the soil naturally have all the nutrients plants need?
The soil does naturally contain nutrients, but the problem is that when we continuously grow crops in the same field year after year, those nutrients get depleted. The plants keep taking up those nutrients, and eventually the soil becomes less fertile. So to keep those nutrient levels up, farmers add manure to replenish what's been used up.
Okay, so adding manure is like giving the soil a vitamin boost.
Exactly. Now, both manure and fertilizers provide nutrients, but there are some key differences. Manure is an organic substance. It comes from natural sources.
Like what?
Well, it's basically decomposed plant and animal waste. Farmers collect things like animal manure, crop residues, and other organic materials and let them decompose in pits.
So it's like nature's recycling program.
You got it.
Yeah.
Those little microorganisms like bacteria and fungi, they do all the work, breaking down that organic matter and creating a nutrient-rich compost. You might have heard of composting or vermicomposting. Those are just specific methods of making manure.
Okay, so manure is the natural option. What about fertilizers?
Fertilizers are typically chemical substances that are manufactured in factories. They're designed to provide a concentrated dose of specific nutrients, especially nitrogen, N, phosphorus, P, and potassium, K, often represented by NPK.
Okay.
Common examples include things like urea, ammonium sulfate, superphosphate, and potash.
Our sources mention that fertilizers have helped farmers get higher yields of crops like wheat, paddy, and maize, so they definitely have their benefits.
Definitely. They can be very effective in boosting crop production, especially when the soil is lacking in specific nutrients. But there's a catch. Using too much chemical fertilizer can actually harm the soil in the long run.
So more isn't always better.
Exactly. Too much fertilizer can disrupt the natural balance of microorganisms in the soil and even lead to water pollution through runoff.
So it's important to use fertilizers carefully.
Absolutely. Our sources really stress the importance of either substituting those chemical fertilizers with organic manure whenever possible, or letting the fields lie fallow for a period.
What does lying fallow mean?
Basically, it means giving the land a break, leaving it uncultivated for a season or two to allow the soil to naturally replenish its nutrients.
Like a vacation for the soil.
Haha, exactly. And speaking of keeping that soil healthy, manure has some other advantages too.
Oh, like what?
Well, it helps the soil hold on to moisture better, which is important during dry periods.
Okay.
It also makes the soil more porous, meaning there's better air circulation. Those roots can breathe easier.
We talked about that.
And it helps boost those beneficial microbes we talked about earlier, the ones that break down organic matter and cycle those nutrients. Plus, manure improves the overall texture of the soil, making it easier for roots to grow.
So manure is like a multitasker.
It really is.
Well,
And our sources also talk about crop rotation. Have you heard of that?
yeah, it's like switching up what you plant in a field each season, right?
Right. It's a really smart farming technique. Farmers will grow different types of crops in a planned sequence on the same plot of land. One example is what farmers in northern India do. They'll grow legumes, like beans or peas, one season, and then follow it with wheat the next.
Okay.
And there's a really cool reason for this. Legumes have these special structures on their roots called nodules. And these nodules are home to these amazing bacteria called rhizobium.
Bacteria in the roots?
Yep. And these rhizobium bacteria have this incredible ability to convert nitrogen gas from the air into forms that plants can actually use.
So they're like tiny little nitrogen factories.
That's a great way to put it. And that nitrogen is a key nutrient for plant growth, so it naturally enriches the soil for the following wheat crop.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So I've got the soil prepared, the seeds planted, nutrients taken care of. What else is absolutely essential for those plants to survive and grow?
Water. That's where irrigation comes in.
Essential for all life, right?
Right. And plants are no exception. Did you know that almost 90% of a plant is water? It's crucial for pretty much every process growth, nutrient absorption, and even protection from extreme temperatures.
Wow.
And our sources highlight that seed germination. The sprouting of a seed just can't happen without water.
Okay, so when there's not enough rain or natural water sources, farmers have to step in and provide water artificially. That's what we call irrigation, right?
Exactly. Irrigation is all about making sure those plants have a consistent water supply. And the frequency of irrigation, how often you need to water, depends on several factors, like the type of crop, the soil type, and the weather. Obviously, in hot weather, they need more water because of evaporation.
Makes sense. So where does all the water for irrigation come from?
It can come from all sorts of places. There are natural sources like wells, tube wells, ponds, lakes, and rivers. And then there are man-made systems like dams and canals.
So a whole variety of water sources. And how is that water actually delivered to the crops? Our sources talked about traditional and modern methods of irrigation.
Right. Traditional methods often involved a lot of manual labor or animal power. They would use things like a moat, that's a system with a pulley and a bucket, to draw water from a well, or a chain pump, where a series of buckets attached to a chain lifts the water.
That sounds pretty labor-intensive.
It was. And then there was the deckly, a lever system using a counterweight to lift the water, and the rahat, which is another lever system usually powered by animals walking in a circle.
These traditional methods were definitely less expensive to set up, but they were also less efficient with water usage.
That's true. A lot of that water was lost through evaporation and seepage.
Okay, so what about modern irrigation? What are some of the key advancements?
Well, modern techniques focus on using water more efficiently and minimizing waste. There are two main systems you should know about: sprinkler systems and drip systems.
Okay, let's start with sprinkler systems. How do those work?
Sprinkler systems are great for uneven land and areas where water might be scarce. They work by setting up a network of pipes across the field.
Okay.
And these pipes have rotating nozzles that spray water over the crops, like rain.
So they're basically simulating rainfall.
Yep. This method is often used for longs, coffee plantations, and several other types of crops.
And it's much more efficient than manually carrying water to each plant.
Definitely.
And then there's the drip system, which sounds even more water efficient.
The drip system is amazing for water conservation. It delivers water directly to the base of the plants, drop by drop. So you're minimizing water loss through evaporation or seepage. It's the best technique for watering fruit plants, gardens, and trees, especially in those regions facing water scarcity.
So it's all about delivering water right where it's needed. Okay, the plants are growing, getting their nutrients, and being watered. What's the next challenge farmers need to tackle?
Weeds.
What exactly are weeds?
Weeds are basically just unwanted plants that haven't been intentionally planted.
Like the party crashers of the plant world.
Yeah. And those party crashers can cause some serious problems. Weeds compete with crops for essential resources: water, nutrients, sunlight, even space.
Okay.
They can really hinder the growth of those crops and reduce the final harvest.
So getting rid of those weeds is crucial for a successful crop.
Absolutely. There are several strategies farmers use for weed control. One key preventative measure is tilling the soil before sowing.
Like we talked about earlier.
Yep. That tilling process actually uproots and kills a lot of weeds that have already started growing.
So it's like tackling the problem before it even starts.
Exactly. But weeds can still pop up later on.
So what do you do then?
There's always the good old-fashioned manual removal method. Pulling the weeds out by hand or cutting them down close to the ground using a tool called a kerpie. It's most effective when you do it before those weeds start producing flowers and seeds.
You want to stop them from spreading.
Right. And using seed drills during sowing can actually help uproot some of those smaller weeds that are already in the field.
So the seed drill has multiple benefits.
It does. But for larger fields or tougher weeds, there are also chemical methods. Things like weedicides.
Weedicides are chemicals designed to kill weeds, right?
Exactly. They're sprayed on the fields and are supposed to target just the weeds, not the crops. Okay. A common example mentioned in our sources is 2004D.
But there are some cautions about using these chemicals, right?
Right. Weedicides are chemicals, and they can have potential health effects for those handling them.
Okay.
So safety precautions are crucial things like wearing protective clothing and covering your nose and mouth during spraying.
Always better to be safe than sorry.
Exactly.
Okay, we've prepared the soil, planted those seeds, provided the right nutrients and water, and protected the crops from weeds.
And now it's time for the grand finale, harvesting.
That's the moment when all that hard work pays off. So tell me, what exactly does harvesting involve?
Harvesting basically means cutting and gathering those mature crops from the field. For cereals like wheat and rice, this usually happens after about 3 to 4 months of growth.
Okay.
The traditional way to harvest was to use a sickle, that's a handheld tool, with a curved blade. Farmers would cut the plants down by hand.
A lot of work.
Definitely. But nowadays, on larger farms, they use machines called harvesters to speed things up.
Technology to the rescue again.
Yep. And once the crop is harvested, there's another step, separating the grain from the rest of the plant.
Right. You've got to get those valuable grains separated from the chaff and the straw.
Exactly. That process is called threshing.
Threshing.
And these days, many farmers use a machine called a combine, which combines the tasks of harvesting and threshing. It cuts the crops, separates the grain, and even cleans it all in one go.
Talk about efficiency. Our sources also mention that sometimes farmers burn the leftover plant stubs in the field after harvesting, but there were some concerns about that too.
Yes, sometimes farmers burn the stubble to quickly clear the land for the next planting season. But, as our source pointed out, this can create air pollution and increase the risk of fire spreading.
So it's not the most environmentally friendly practice.
It's not ideal.
But on a brighter note, the completion of harvest is a big celebratory occasion in many cultures.
Oh, absolutely. Harvest festivals are huge in many agricultural communities. It's a time to celebrate the hard work and the abundance of food.
In India, you've got festivals like Pongal, Baisakhi, Holi, Diwali, Nabanya, and Bihu.
Right. Each one with its unique traditions and rituals.
So it's not just about the practicalities, it's also about the cultural significance of the harvest.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've harvested our crops, separated the grains. The last step is storage. Why is proper storage of those harvested grains so important?
Well, you don't want all that hard work to go to waste.
Made sense.
Proper storage protects those grains from moisture, insects, rodents, and microorganisms.
Okay.
Basically, it ensures that those grains stay good and edible for a long time, so they can be consumed throughout the year or even saved as seeds for the next planting season. And freshly harvested grains have a lot of moisture in them, which makes them especially susceptible to spoilage and pests.
So removing that moisture is key.
Right. Before storing the grains, they need to be properly dried, usually by spreading them out in the sun. Drying them reduces the chances of mold, bacteria, and insect infestations.
So it's all about preservation.
Yep. And for farmers with smaller harvests, they often store the dried grains in simple jute bags or metallic bins.
Okay.
Sometimes they even mix dried neem leaves with the grains, because neem leaves have natural insect repellent properties.
That's pretty cool, using natural solutions.
It is. And for larger scale storage, they use specialized facilities like silos and granaries.
Those are the big ones?
Yep. These facilities are designed to protect huge quantities of grain from pests like rats and insects. And they often use chemical treatments to control pests and prevent spoilage over longer periods.
So different storage solutions depending on the scale of the operation.
Right.
Now, I want to touch on one more topic that our sources brought up: food from animals.
Okay.
What about the animals that we raise for food?
Well, just like plants, animals are a crucial source of food. Think about milk, which we get from cows, buffaloes, goats, and even camels in some regions. Or things like cod liver oil, which comes from fish. And raising animals for food also involves a whole set of practices and considerations.
It's not just about letting them wander around and eat grass.
Haha, not exactly.
Yeah.
Just like crops need specific care and attention, animals raised for food, whether for meat, milk, or eggs, also need proper food, shelter, and care to ensure they stay healthy and productive.
Makes sense. So it's like a parallel food production system alongside crops.
It is.
Okay, wow. This has been a really thorough deep dive into the world of crop production and management.
We've covered a lot.
From the very origins of agriculture to the complex practices used in modern farming.
From soil to seed to harvest to storage.
And it's so clear that each of those 7 basic agricultural practices, soil preparation, sowing, adding nutrients, irrigation, weed control, harvesting, and storage, are absolutely essential for ensuring we have enough food to feed everyone.
Right.
And it's amazing how technology and science have transformed agriculture over the years. Things like tractors, seed drills, advanced irrigation systems, a deeper understanding of soil nutrients, and the benefits of crop rotation.
All leading to greater efficiency and productivity.
It's truly incredible how it all comes together.
It is.
Now, for all of you listening, here's something to think about. As our global population continues to grow, and as we become more aware of the need for sustainable practices, what new and innovative approaches do you think will be crucial for the future of food production? How can we build on these fundamental principles we've discussed today to ensure a stable, efficient, and responsible food supply for generations to come? It's a question worth pondering as we move
It's
forward.
a big question.
It is.